Welcome back to another episode of Red Tinted Glasses in a week that saw David Ojabo become the first Aberdonian drafted by an NFL side. Ricky Foster fighting with his own fans. We finally, on an episode of Red Tinted Glasses, have an Aberdeen win to discuss. It feels like it's been a while. So much so that Calum has actually departed. We will see positivity on this episode because I know a lot of you said we were a bit too negative on last week's episode. But joining me in Calum's absence, I'm delighted to welcome a man that many of you may know more for his tattoo of Christian Ramirez. It is Philip Mair. Philip, welcome to the show.
Hello, Glen. Thank you very much for having me on. I think the tattoo point is very accurate, which is upsetting that that's what I'm known for now. But yeah. I'll take it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to help you extend your 15 minutes of fame by getting you on the podcast. But I suppose with normally having a co-host that is very much into the NBA, it felt appropriate to get yourself on, and at least I've now got someone on that loves Formula One as much as me as well.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I've got the Rick 3 hat on.
Yes, I know.
My shocking Barnet at the moment.
Yeah. I spotted the Danny Rick merchandise. Big fan of that. See, I can't wear my Max Verstappen stuff because it doesn't look good wearing orange on an Aberdeen podcast. But as much as it would be pleasurable speaking about Formula One, we do have to speak about Aberdeen on the podcast. We are here to speak about the Dons' win over Dundee, and Jim Goodwin coming out after the game saying 3 points were all that mattered. It didn't matter how they came about. I think that's pretty much a fair assessment of the 90 minutes that most of us sat through this weekend.
Yeah, no, I would definitely say so. I think I said similar. I think I put a tweet up after the game, which was basically 3 points is 3 points, and with the scrap we've been in recently, it was very much needed any which way it came. So it's fine to just finally see a win at Pittodrie in what feels like forever, even though I think the last one was Hibs, which wasn't. Yeah, it
wasn't that long ago, but it was only the second league win of 2022 that we've managed to record. But yeah, two of those, as you rightly say, coming at home. The win does put us now 8 points ahead of St Johnstone, who suffered a 1-0 defeat to St Mirren. And we have a 20-goal difference better off than the Perth Saints. Do you feel that's kind of relaxed this mild panic that was sweeping not only across this podcast but across social media and the Aberdeen support in the build-up to this Dundee game? Is it safe to say the relegation fears are over?
I would say yes. I don't want to be definitive. I mean, I can't see us losing 3 and St Johnstone winning 3, which is quite nice. But I think I'm not gonna be happy until next week's over, and we've hopefully bettered St Johnstone's result. But yeah, just I think it's just fine to finally have that little bit of relief. And I think you could kind of feel that at full time on Saturday, as I think everybody just kind of relaxed, which was very good. Yeah,
I mean, as I said, you don't want to be definitive on the matter. It's obviously not mathematically safe, that there is a possibility St Johnstone can still catch us. Obviously, the goal difference does possibly help us in our favour, but hopefully this weekend coming against Hibs, we can put the maths behind us and seal our place in the Premiership for next season. I think, though, an important point as well is it's a clean sheet as well that we got this weekend. It's just our 5th of the season, but the 4 of them coming at home. I suppose that's one positive from the weekend as well, not just the 3 points.
Yeah, no, and I think it's a clean sheet issue, which makes me not want to come out and say we're going to be safe, because we're just shipping goals away for fun at this point. Mm-hmm. So obviously it's a bit of a worry when you're conceding as much as we have been, because I think it's something we've not really been used to. The past few seasons, especially at Pittodrie, we've always been quite a solid team defensively.
Yeah.
So hopefully this will maybe now be the start of things getting better going forward. But with Bates' performance, I'm not going to hold my breath.
Yeah, we'll come on to the centre-back pairing and maybe look at a little bit into the job required by Jim Goodwin in the summer, but we'll look at the lineup and how the Dons approached the game on Saturday. It seemed to be a 4-4-2 formation with Ross McCrory suspended after his red card against Livingston. Christian Ramirez returned to the starting 11, replacing the Red Tinted Glasses Player of the Year. And we also saw Calum Ramsey, obviously a lot of speculation going around his future off the field. He returned in place of Funso Ojo. Again, I normally ask Calum this question. How did you feel on seeing that starting lineup? I suppose quite a positive looking lineup, very attacking with both Marley Watkins and Ramirez starting.
Yeah, it was. I mean, for what we had at our disposal, it was probably the best we could put out.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, having McCrory out was a big miss.
Yeah.
But on paper, it was a really attacking lineup. I don't know. I just found, I think it was Ramirez's role more than anything in that 4-4-2.
Mm-hmm.
As the game developed, which kind of frustrated me. It almost seemed like he was affected by a direct swap for McCrory. At times, you couldn't tell if he was playing up front with Watkins or if he was playing in midfield.
Mm-hmm.
So that would probably be my only gripe.
And do you think that was more? Do you think that's more down to the player not knowing the role, or because there's been a lot of talk about Ramirez's future and whether he's quote unquote chucked it? Do you think it was just that unfamiliarity in positional sense for Christian Ramirez this weekend?
I don't know. I think it could be a bit of both. I think part of it's potentially that. I think the other part is his role's kind of been unclear since Glass has left. I mean, under Glass, he was constantly in the 6-yard box. He was always in the middle. Whereas I found once Glass went, he's had an awful tendency to either drop deep or find himself out wide, which is obviously, as a striker, not where you want to be.
Yeah.
So I think at times it left Watkins quite isolated when he was on the ball. But as well, it almost became a sort of pseudo 4-3-3. With Ramirez playing as like a 10, is how I viewed it.
Yeah.
Which, don't get me wrong, he does suit that role well at times. I mean, he did spray a couple of good balls out on Saturday. But I think if he could have stayed higher up and pressed a bit more with Watkins in the first half, I think it could have been a little bit more comfortable for us.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of people, we've done it on the podcast as well, crying out for that partnership of Ramirez and Watkins to really kick off. We saw it kind of in December time. The St Mirren game at home really sticks out in the memory as one where that partnership, we thought, wow, this could be potent, after the winter break. And unfortunately, fitness and interest, if you want to call it that, has kind of hampered that partnership developing. I saw a few comments after the game about Marley Watkins' performance, people wanting the real Marley Watkins back. How did you feel that Marley Watkins did at the weekend against Dundee?
I feel it was very similar to the week before against Livingston. I think he's not a 9, and I think Goodwin needs to realise that pretty quickly. He's a tendency to sort of try and get himself out wide and get himself on the ball, which when he gets into those positions, he's great. He'll take on his man, and he looks like a confident player. But as a 9, I just think he looks almost lost at times.
Yeah.
Which was great when he was pressing, but I mean, by about the 70th minute, he was dead on his legs. So whether that partnership's going to work if they're both constantly trying to be on the ball, I don't know, which is a bit of a worry considering it's really our 2 only striking options for the rest of the season.
Yeah, which almost helps that we are close to being all but safe this season, because I think had the result not gone in our favour this weekend, there would have been again these doubts, and we're going to come on to that a little bit later on actually. So I want to kind of get your opinions on the front too. But we always like to see Aberdeen come out on the front foot at home. We want to put the away side under pressure, and we pretty much did that with the first kick of the game. Lewis Ferguson, very audacious, trying his luck from kickoff. Did you think there was ever a chance that was going to dip under the crossbar and in? I
mean, I kind of like looked down for about 2 seconds and I heard everyone kind of gasp and I was like, what's going on? And for a minute I thought it was in when the keeper had bundled himself into the net. But yeah, I mean, it was a young keeper in goals for Dundee, and admittedly he had a good game. He played well. But I think that will kind of bit of a wake-up call next week. I think he'll be starting a bit closer at his line.
Yeah, and I suppose that was at times almost as good as it got for Aberdeen in the first half, because you said we've been shipping goals for fun this season. I don't think that's harsh at all. It's very fair, and the goals that we've been shipping have been cheap, and we almost did our best to afford Dundee some cheap goals. Declan Gallagher, a player I really hoped it was going to work for at Pittodrie. We saw how much he bossed Alexander Mitrovic in Serbia, that famous playoff night for Scotland. A solid player on the international scene, and through misfortune, probably through injury and maybe a lack of game time, things just haven't worked out for him at Aberdeen. But him and Bates, the partnership just hasn't gelled in recent weeks. There seems to be that nervous energy. I don't know whether that's being generated by the fans, our slide down the league, but it's causing us problems, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first half was definitely far worse than the second half in terms of Gallagher. Bates kind of just was dreadful all game. And with the most respect to him, he was pretty shocking. But like you say, they've just never looked confident, which is strange. Like you say, when you see Gallagher in a Scotland jersey, he's so composed, he's solid at the back, he can play out from the back, which I think in the first half was some of his balls out were shocking. Square 50-50 balls into Ferguson, which I think caused one of the chances where Lewis had to pull off a really good save at his top corner.
Yeah, that was the first chance that Dundee really had when, as you said, Gallagher tried to get that ball out to Lewis Ferguson. I'm not really sure what Gallagher and Ferguson are doing there, because we've put ourselves under needless pressure. I'm not sure if there was a better ball that Gallagher could have chosen, or just hoof it up, really just relieve that pressure. But I suppose for Joe Lewis, a keeper that's had his critics this season, this podcast again included, his stats haven't exactly covered him in glory. But again, he's not really been helped when he then has to face a shot as a result of some poor defensive play, but more than made up for it. And again, probably showed why he is such a good keeper with that save from Danny Mullen.
Yeah, I think Saturday really showed glimpses of what Lewis was like at his best for Aberdeen. There's a lot of times Dundee were creating chances and you felt actually confident for the first time in a while that Lewis was going to stop them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that justifies keeping him as number one next season, personally. Yeah. My opinion is I feel like we should get a slightly younger keeper in, and especially a keeper that's maybe slightly quicker and slightly more accurate with his distribution.
Mm-hmm.
I think that can sometimes be quite a justifiable gripe with Lewis, is sometimes you think we've got a chance to counter. We've got quick players like Hayes and Besham playing on the wings.
Yeah.
So I think maybe having that slightly more modern, I use the term modern, slightly more modern goalkeeper, that's kind of just a bit sharper, a bit more sort of tactically aware, shall we say, of what's going on. But no, I mean, Saturday was, Lewis could have easily probably got man the match, because first half it could have been 3-0 down if he wasn't there.
Yeah, and I suppose he had to be called into action again as Declan Gallagher played a strange ball to Calum and Ramsey, who didn't really have the opportunity to turn and get rid, and found himself bundled off the ball. And as Dundee broke and fired the ball across, David Bates stood and admired the cross, and it was Paul McMullen this time who beat David Bates to the ball, which I think annoyed me more about how stationary Bates was in that situation. But Joe Lewis, not stationary, very alert to stop Dundee going ahead. And again, it's just we kind of touched on this in last week's episode, myself and Calum, saying we're not learning from mistakes week in, week out. We're not learning from mistakes 5-10 minutes apart, even in a game as it goes on. We're just constantly putting ourselves on the back foot, and it's not going to help. Obviously, the game 0-0 at that point, a game that had so much riding on it from an Aberdeen point of view. Yeah, I mean, I think that chance especially was just part and parcel of Bates' game on Saturday. Mm-hmm. So often, I mean, especially balls over the top, he would sit and he would watch them, but he would let the ball bounce, and you think, just get out.
just clear it. You're a centre half, just go back to basics. Because you've got someone like Paul Mullen who's rapid coming at you. There's no chance Bates or Gallagher is going to keep up with him if he gets past them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I think for someone like Bates, who's been playing in Germany, played in a Rangers team, he was touted as one of Scotland's next big centre halves. And with the experience he's got, I think sometimes he looks almost more inexperienced than like Mckenzie and Ramsey do at the back.
Yeah.
He just sometimes looks like he just panics too much on the ball, and when the ball's coming at him, that you would just think with him and Gallagher at the back, one of them should be able to kind of grab the other by the neck and kind of haul them back into it and getting the focus up a bit.
Yeah, and do you think there's maybe that kind of nervousness in their play because they've got young fullbacks either side of them that, we've been kind of critical of Calvin Ramsey this season in terms he's not maybe been switched on fully defensively. Jack Mckenzie, I think, is certainly the better of the two defensively. Do you think there's that's had an effect on either Gallagher or Bates this season?
I mean, it could do. I mean, I guess that comes down to the instructions they're getting from management. I mean, if they're getting told, look, you need to kind of drag them through the game and give them as much support as you can, which I think Hayes has done for the most part with Mckenzie.
Yeah.
It almost looks like at the start of the season, Hayes was kind of coaching Mckenzie through games. So whether they're getting asked to do that and that's kind of just dragging their focus elsewhere and making them focus less on their own game, it could be. But I mean, I think to be good defensively, I think you've got to have confidence in everyone that's around you.
Yeah.
The minute you start doubting who you're playing with in your back three, back four, back five, whatever it might be that we've played this season, you're going to be shaky and you're going to start having little errors come into your game, little silly errors, which are so avoidable.
Yeah. And sadly, they're becoming more and more prominent in this Aberdeen defence. However, one player that has probably been a shining light over the last two games, and obviously we lost that game to Livingston, but he'll certainly be happy with his own personal performance, is Jack Mckenzie. Another good 90 minutes under his belt this weekend. How impressed have you been with Jack Mckenzie coming back into this Aberdeen team?
I think he's been brilliant the past couple of games. And I think on Saturday he was robbed to get a man of the match. I thought he was brilliant from the first whistle to the last. And I think what's impressed me more since he's came back from his injury is he seems to have added a bit more of attack and urgency to his game, which I found he lacked compared to Ramsey. They were kind of like polar opposites when they first broke into the team. But yesterday he was brilliant in driving us forward. Him and Hayes on the left were great. And I think, hopefully it's a sign of his confidence coming back. Obviously, when you first come back from injury, you're going to be a bit tentative, jumping into things. But hopefully this is him kind of setting his standard now, going forward. And if we can have two pretty good prospects at fullback, then it's positive going into the summer financially for the club, but also going into next season as well.
Yeah, and I suppose it's a good point you make there about kind of coming back from injury. I think that game at Tannadice, I just felt Stephen Glass maybe rushed him back a bit too soon for that fixture. Obviously, then picks up a knock in that game and sets him back further. But obviously with, Kieran Gwenya being out on loan, winning the league with Celtic Hearts, talk about whether he'll come back into the fold next season. You've got Jack Milne, I know it's more of a centre-back, not left-back, but Johnny Hayes, yes, he's still going to be here next season, but how much of that pace and ability is he going to have next season? Obviously, age does affect things. There's an opportunity there for Jack Mckenzie to really nail down that left-back spot as his own, really, as we go into next season, into the summer. So maybe wanting to put himself at the forefront of the manager's mind going into what is going to be a big summer in terms of transfers, comings and goings at the football club.
Yeah, no, I think he's definitely done well to mark his card and get him, put him definitely in contention for holding down the left back spot next season. It'll be interesting to see how Goodwin views it. Like you say, you mentioned Gwenya, who I would like to see maybe getting a run. Whether he's ready for a run at Premiership level, it's hard to tell until you're in that scenario.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe would you test him in the Premier Sports Cup at all, or maybe more a pre-season game instead?
Well, I mean, we're gonna be playing group stage of the cup, so I mean, you're going to be against sort of League Two Championship standard anyway.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be a bad idea to kind of have him around for that, play him in those games. If you don't think he's ready, you can ship him out on a 6-month loan in January.
Yeah.
But I think, I don't know, I think hopefully Glass had kind of planted the seed of using youth, and hopefully Goodwin will kind of keep that going. I mean, it was quite upsetting not upsetting, it's a bit of a pretty dramatic term, that. But, it was a bit frustrating to see the Evening Express article today about the likes of Turner and Ruth, basically being told that they've not got a future.
Certainly the Turner one surprised me by, certainly judging about the reports coming out of Ireland about how well he's done at Cliftonville, obviously winning the cup over there as well, and close to winning the league as well. It seems that he's certainly impressed their fans, and I've got to share the same sentiment. I think out of the two, I'm certainly more surprised that we're not maybe going to take a chance on Turner next season. Ruth, I'm not too surprised about, given he's probably struggled at Falkirk this season when he was out on loan, but I mean, just shows how big a job we've got. Where obviously we'll maybe come on to the man that's on your leg, Christian Ramirez, in a second, but certainly up front we've got a big job coming up this summer.
Yeah, I mean, just going back to that point on Turner, when you look at us defensively, really our only options just now are Gallagher and Bates. Devlin's away, Constein's on his way out. You would think, you would maybe keep. I mean, who knows? I mean, one of Gallagher or Bates might even be away in the summer. Who knows what's going on behind closed doors?
I suppose then the other point on that, in terms of younger players coming through, you've also got Jack Milne, who I saw a couple of times in the Highland League this season. 6'4", but he was playing in midfield, and the time I watched him, Brechin for Martin, I was really impressed with it, the way he kind of drove Brechin forward and started building some of their attacks. Now, Aberdeen obviously see him as more of a centre back, and it'll be interesting to see how he gets on in a position that he's not actually possibly played competitively in. And I think is it Ethan Towler? Is it him that's at Elgin City, 17-year-old, again highly thought of at Aberdeen? But again, is that going to be too young to be coming into the first team? Will that again be another loan out? You maybe look at again Peterhead obviously securing their League One status, when you spoke of Kieran Ngwenya, if he doesn't quite fit that mould of Aberdeen, could he find himself going back to Cove? He's been there before, obviously them getting up to the Championship. There's possibilities we could hopefully maybe exploit with Cove and sending players out there on loan to give them Championship experience as opposed to League One.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely possible. I think it's good just now the North East has got so much options for young players. Obviously Peterhead, Montrose, Cove, even Bankside playing in the Highland League with Fraserburgh now as well. There's plenty of options for players to go out and get game time at various levels. So I mean, hopefully we're not just going to let them just sit and sort of rot on the bench effectively. I think if Goodwin's not going to use young players, he's got to put them out. I know there was word of Ryan Duncan coming back in and maybe getting a shot in the first team. Whether that's to maybe sort of chop and change with Hayes, depending on how his legs are holding up, if he's still sort of first choice winger next season. So I think it'll be interesting. I think we've definitely, as a club, got a pretty solid youth setup. And I would like to see more of the youth players getting a bit of a chance. Not even just to help us as a team, even just financially. I mean, we've got a new
stadium to build. So.
Exactly, yeah. The new stadium, what's it, 76 million, like the rumoured sort of
it's not
cost or whatever.
It won't build itself, and I suppose that's maybe something that we could see against St Johnstone, St Mirren in the last couple of games of the season, depending how the result goes, or the results, I should say, go this weekend against Hibs. If it does, become mathematically safe for Aberdeen? Could we see the likes of Ryan Duncan come into the fold, a Jack Milne who's found himself on the bench, get a little run out, maybe alongside Andy Considine in his final farewell? Just ease them into games that don't have a lot riding on them at the end of the season. But one man who we don't know whether or not he's going to be here next season is, of course, Christian Ramirez. How do you think he got on Saturday? I watched the highlights before we recorded this episode, and again, he had a couple of chances that was well saved by Sharp in the Dundee goal, and another day maybe find the back of the net. Do you think this weekend was more down to him having to kind of play behind Marley Watkins rather than in previous weeks where, again, to quote what's been said online, he doesn't look interested?
I think there's a few areas which kind of feed into Ramirez's game. I think one of them, as you say, is playing deep. I think that just kind of almost cut him out the game effectively. As much as he was getting on the ball, he was on the ball in the wrong positions.
Yeah.
I think he cut a very frustrated figure, as we see when he got subbed off. Whether that was frustration at being subbed or missing the chance before or whatever it might be. And then really his head's probably just not in it at the moment. I mean, obviously we've seen the Twitter outbursts and the Instagram stories from family members and whatnot. So he is caught in a very dejected figure, and I think also confidence as well. I mean, he's not found the net since I got the tattoo, so that's brilliant for me.
Your fault then.
Yeah, it's all on me. I'm the crutch here. But no, I think some of the chances yesterday, I think if they were 4 or 5 months ago, they were probably in the net.
Yeah.
When he was at the peak of his scoring. And I think it just kind of goes to show what confidence can do for a player.
Yeah, I kind of agree on that. And I'm going to come on to a point in a minute about, the age-old argument of where we would be without Christian Ramirez's goals. You could almost argue, where would we be without Lewis Ferguson, as cool as he is in terms of taking penalties? And before we get on to the penalties, there were a couple of chances for both sides. Vicente Bizaouin at the start of the second half, with a good drive forward, but unlucky to find his shot go past the outside of the post and not curl into the bottom corner. But also Calvin Ramsey, as I said, defensively, maybe there's been question marks around him this season, but showing good awareness to get back on the line to clear Ryan Sweeney's header off the line to prevent Dundee taking the lead. Jack Mckenzie was brought down in the box. Willie Calum, maybe surprisingly, uninterested in the decision. What was your thoughts on that? Did you think that was a stonewall penalty?
Well, I mean, I've not actually watched anything like Sports Scene back, but from where I was sitting, I thought it was a blatant penalty. I mean, to me, it looked like the boy just came right through the back of him.
Yeah.
You think if that occurs a foot outside the box, you're probably blowing for a free kick, because I don't see how it's any different. It's in the box. Yeah,
I mean, it was that much of a penalty appeal that the YouTube highlights don't actually include it. So it is on Reddit TV's highlights. And I mean, for a referee of Willie Collum's level, I just don't see how he hasn't awarded that. And again, this plays into my fears of VAR coming into play halfway through next season, when you see some of the decisions that have been made this weekend around penalty incidents, and even the goal kick that Andrew Dallas awarded at McDermott Park for the tackle on Ferris Main that went out for the most obvious corner in the world. But I suppose almost in similar fashion to the game against Ross County, Philip, when I certainly felt that Ross County should have had a penalty for the trip on Regan's Charles Cook, but then the incident with a handball occurred and Ross County got a penalty. Johnny Hayes' trip by Jordan Marshall as he races into the box, I wasn't convinced in terms of watching the highlights how much contact there actually is. It's maybe just a slight touch Johnny Hayes feels and he goes down. But this time, Willie Collum points to the spot. Again, what was your kind of reaction in the ground at the time? Did you think that one was just as much as a penalty?
I mean, from where, because I sit in the south stand, so I was kind of just behind it. So to me, it looked like, I think it was Marshall stuck his leg out. Whether there was contact, I've got no idea.
Yeah.
At the time, I definitely thought it was Calum kind of realising that he'd made a mess of the first one. I think someone had probably definitely said in his ear, "You've it a shambles there, pal." And I think he's kind of thought, well, I've got to kind of make it up now, and I might not make it out of Aberdeen alive. But yeah, no, I mean, it was really the one moment of real quality that really separated the sides. I mean, Hayes rolling the years back, about 10 years at that point, just driving into the box. And yeah, I mean, whether there was contact or not, I'm not really caring.
No, and it wasn't. Yeah, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter now that we have got the 3 points. Lewis Ferguson, as I said, cool as you like from the spot, just putting the penalty down the middle, and probably said the words you used at full time, just that sense of relief that goal finally came.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it had been, I think the whole ground had basically been wanting it from kick-off. I mean, you could feel the tension. Obviously, I mean, you could hear from the atmosphere whenever decisions weren't going our way, or if there were slack passes, there was a lot of frustration in Pittodrie.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, it was surprisingly for the crowd. It erupted when the penalty hit the net.
Yeah, I suppose that is just the relief and the emotion.
Sheer elation. Yeah.
What's kind of been building up over the last maybe week to 10 days, obviously after the Livingston result as well. But I think I saw someone on Twitter, Jimbo Jims, he kind of did like a kind of stat in terms of our penalties, because it was free and Khalid tweeted out saying who's going to step up if Lewis Ferguson does leave us in the summer to take that mantle of solid penalty taker. And I think in the stats, GMS, Rooney, McLean, Ferguson and Cosgrove, there's only been 5 misses in our last 70 penalties that those players have taken. So it does show that when we get a penalty, we are pretty solid from the spot. But in our last 3 games, Philip, we haven't actually scored from open goal. How much of a concern is that to you going forward for the last 3 games of the season, but also going into the summer, given, the speculation over Christian Ramirez, Marley Watkins, we've got his doubts on fitness, and then, as you said, Evening Express breaking that news that Michael Ruth's not likely to be at the club next season. So possibly looking at needing 3 strikers into the club?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of scoring, I mean, definitely you need an out-and-out 9 that's going to just basically poach. I mean, you look at, I mean, as much as I hate to give him any plaudits, but I mean, Morelos at Rangers just needs someone that fills his role, that'll just sit in the 18-yard box and just pick up anything that comes to him. But I think equally as important to a striker is a bit of creativity. I mean, Barron and Bessian seem to have shown glimpses of it. They're able to get on the ball and be positive. And I think I agree. I can't remember who it was on Twitter that was speaking about it, but it still feels like we've almost not replaced McLean.
Yeah.
It's been that long since he's left, and I think that's the fear if Ferguson does go as well, because he can kind of have that ability to pick the ball up, drive us forward, and either score himself or get us a good opportunity. So I think it'll be a big summer in terms of getting attacking quality in more than anything.
Yeah, and I that's actually quite an interesting point you make there about not really replacing Kenny McLean. I don't even really think we never really got much of a chance given when he left, but we haven't really replaced that kind of creativity and directness that Ryan Hedges offered us at the first half of the season. A player maybe some felt flattered to deceive at times, but we've certainly missed that in the second half of the season, I felt. With Ross McCrory being suspended on Saturday in that win, how do you think that affected that midfield 3? Because, okay, results haven't been coming, but I think that 3 of McCrory, Ferguson and Barron do have something about them. So if Ferguson, or maybe when Ferguson inevitably leaves this summer, is that going to be difficult to replace that one of those 3 figureheads in that midfield?
I think it can be. I think, with Barron and McCrory in the midfield, it kind of gives Ferguson the sort of freedom to go forward, which is where I think he shines, sort of, is when he is almost playing in that sort of box-to-box 10 role. And I found that at times on Saturday he was very deep, which kind of didn't allow him to have the same sort of influence as usual. So I think as long as you get that balance right, and you either get someone who is an out and out 10, or you let Barron maybe take the 10, because he looks like he's able to hold his own going forward as well. Get a couple of good chances on Saturday, and you bring in someone to kind of partner McCrory to hold down in sort of defensive midfield. But I suppose it's all down to recruitment. I mean, there's been all this word of a scout in the Czech Republic and the Netherlands, and everything.
Yeah, or if you go by Dave Cormack's interview with Graham Hunter, there's been players from Holland going to Theo Snelder's house to hear about Aberdeen, and whether you want to read too much into that or not.
I suppose on the other hand as well, you could even look at Polvara. None of us have seen enough of him to really pass comment on whether he would be a good fit for the midfield.
Yeah,
which is why I'm hopeful if we get safe on Saturday from Hibs, we might actually see him get more than 5 minutes. Obviously, I don't know where he's like in his recovery from, I think it was a double hernia or whatever he had done.
Well, I remember that since the double hernia, he did obviously come on at Ibrox, and that's the only minutes of note that I remember him having. So, a good point, and just shows a player that almost has been forgotten about since signing for Aberdeen. So, and who knows, there's obviously a couple of other players. Maybe we've been speaking about the youth academy. You've got Kevin Henratti as well, who spent some of the season on loan for Martin, and then barely featured when he moved to Elgin in January. So whether or not there's a future for him, you've obviously got Ryan Duncan. I know more of a winger, but be interesting to see where he's used. I do actually like the point you make there about Connor Barron. I have liked his energy that he's brought to the team, and as you said, had a couple of good chances this weekend against Dundee. He seems to, if there's that opportunity to take a shot, he'll go for it. He won't shirk that responsibility and pass the ball out wide and give the responsibility for somebody else to create something. Kind of takes the game by the scruff of the neck when need be. So certainly that's something I hadn't thought about, and is an exciting prospect, I suppose, of him. It is probably big shoes to fill in respect of Lewis Ferguson, but something that I'm sure he'll relish. That he's certainly reading what's been put out from the club from Connor Barron, a player who's living mine and yours dreams of playing for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think things as well, he seems not similar to Ferguson because they're different players, but he's got that same sort of, I suppose it is a confidence where he isn't really scared of putting himself into things as well, which is quite refreshing for a player, especially his size as well. Because he's not a big lad, but I mean, he was flying into tackles with Charlie Adam, and their centre halves, you're shoving them about when there was fouls, and you think, if he kind of keeps that bit between his teeth, he could be equally as good as a holding midfielder. Because he reads the game well, which is impressive again for his age. I think that confidence is kind of testament to the youth coaching at the club. Because when you look at Ramsey, Mckenzie, Barron, they've all been confident since they came into the team, and none of them have really shied away from, well, not only criticism, but obviously getting themselves involved as well. They've been, they've looked the part. They've definitely not looked like they're fresh out of school teenagers, effectively.
Yeah, I agreed, and I also think as well for Connor as well, he's also benefited. I think he's, if he'd admit himself, from learning from Kevin Thompson this season as well at Celtic Hearts, and obviously getting that experience in League Two has helped him. And I'm just glad that Jim Goodwin's had the faith in him to bring him in, and we've managed to see for ourselves what he can hopefully bring to us next season. And it'll be interesting to see who lines up in alongside that midfield with him, because I think you're right in terms of box-to-box midfielders. You described Lewis Ferguson, Connor Barron probably out of our current squad fits that most. I don't really see Ross McCrory offering that sort of ability. I think he's more suited to being a kind of holding midfielder. I don't know about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where he's best suited. I mean, I think at times when he first joined Aberdeen, he was up and down all game, and he did show a lot of good attacking qualities. But I think with him having to drop into centre back this season, I think his defensive game's gone up tenfold. But I think also he's found that he's a lot more comfortable if he can just break up the play, get the ball out, and kind of just pull the strings from the middle. And so hopefully, I'm hopefully he retains the midfield spot next season, because as much as he's a good centre half, I think he is far better suited to midfield.
And I think, if the talk of him being captain next season is to be believed, I think he is better suited to being in midfield and controlling the team from that position rather than centre back as well, and helping the likes of Connor Bannon and any other players that are coming into the team as well. So Philip, we've been largely positive on this episode up till now, but people will be like, thank God he's not being negative. Well, I'm sorry to say, I'm just going to throw a little bit of negativity in there. How much for you has this result at the weekend papered over any cracks that may have been appearing? Obviously, we're all delighted to see that 3 points being picked up, but is there still some concern from what you've seen at the weekend?
Absolutely. I mean, if we'd lost to Dundee, then I think we would have rightfully deserved to have been in a playoff match. I mean, as bad as we've been this season, there's no way we should have been losing to Dundee, especially with the magnitude of the game in terms of our season.
Yeah.
If you can't get players or get yourself motivated for a game like that, then I don't think top level football is really for you.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would have maybe papered over cracks a bit better if the win was more convincing.
Okay,
A 1-0 from a scrappy penalty shouts. Not exactly doing much to light the world on fire. Obviously, it's nice to get the win, but I think the way we won it and also just the match as a whole showed the sort of cracks we still got and the cracks we still got as a team and the sort of gaps you need to fill.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would kind of say it's given relief, but not exactly instilled much more enthusiasm. I think that kind of goes with it. Yeah, I think part of it goes with it being in the split in the last few games of the season anyway. The season's all but done. I think it's hard to kind of get yourself G'd up for effectively nothing games.
Yeah. I guess then in kind of the same respect, it just highlights more than anything the work that Darren Mowbray and recruitment and Jim Goodwin have got for themselves this summer in terms of that rebuild and making sure that we don't find ourselves in this position again next season.
Absolutely. I think this summer is going to be really important. And I think we've got to get the recruitment right. That's the main thing. We can't afford to have another sort of Chris Forrester and, Stevie May situation where on paper we're thinking, oh, this will be quite good. But, it kind of just hinders us a little bit and ends up being wages for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think as well, as much as I don't like us not having the sort of prospect of European qualification in the summer, because those nights are always brilliant.
Yeah.
Going down to the pub before, it's always a lovely night in terms of weather. It's always a feel-good atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that being out of Europe this season should hopefully do us the world of good.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe we're not going to attract. I was going to say we're maybe not going to attract the same sort of caliber of player without the European football, but I think as a club we do need it to kind of just sort of reassess what are our sort of expectations, what are our priorities, and where do we see ourselves going in the next sort of 5 years.
Yeah, I tend to agree on that in terms of the rebuilding aspect of things that will possibly benefit us not being in Europe. Although I think our season starts just as early, if not a couple of days before being in the group stages of the Premier Sports Cup. But it still irks me when you see tonight the confirmed allocation of European spots for the Scottish Premiership with the winners of the Premiership getting guaranteed group stage football. It looks all that set to be that Rangers or Celtic, whoever finishes first, second, will also get guaranteed group stage football. Hearts, of course, much talked about from an Aberdeen point of view, coming up in the preview for the Hibs game with Michael Monan. We touch on that as well, about the opportunity that both clubs in terms of Aberdeen and Hibs have missed out on. And even when you look, I think fourth place goes into the third qualifying round. So that's just 2 games they need to go through to win into group stages. It just feels like we've missed a huge opportunity this season. And I really hope we give ourselves the best possible platform to build next season. And aspire to be up there fighting for those positions that we'll see us have the opportunity to get what Hearts look forward to next season.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right in the frustration. I mean, I guess that's kind of been a kind of recurring theme this season. Is we've almost been given so much opportunities on a plate to get ourselves into that position, and we've just never taken it.
Yeah.
So I mean, really, we've really only got ourselves to blame for not being in that position. So hopefully we can bounce back next season and get one of the European spots. I mean, I think Hearts, they're pretty much guaranteed minimum Conference League groups.
Yeah.
So even, top three would be, just to guarantee group stage football would be progress on the past few years of Europe that we've had, constantly falling short.
Yeah, and there may be people out there saying, well, God, that's maybe expecting miracles based on what we've seen this season, but let's not forget that Hearts weren't even in the league last season and they found themselves sitting third. So, stranger things have happened this season. So there's certainly, an opportunity there for Aberdeen. And I think, I suppose, Philip, it just highlights that we do have that big job on our hands this summer. What's your thoughts? Let's look past these next 3 games just briefly. Where do you see the club needing to kind of prioritise as we look ahead to the transfer window coming up?
I think it's really shoring up that spine of the team. And by that, I mean, a goalkeeper, if they're not going to be starting, at least quality competition for Lewis. One or maybe even 2 centre-backs, depending on the position that we're in with Bates and Gallagher over the summer.
Yeah.
A new midfielder and definitely somebody who can score goals up front, just kind of having that spine intact. Because we've got the players around that spine already. It's just right through the middle. We seem to just be lacking a little bit. So hopefully, if we can shore that up, next season will be a lot more. Well, we'll have a lot more positives on the podcast, hopefully.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely be hoping that there is a lot more positive to speak about. Do you feel that then on James Goodwin's comments, kind of discussed it a little bit last week about the 4 or 5 players that are needed to be brought in? Do you feel that that's kind of an accurate assessment in terms of numbers, given what you're saying about building a solid spine?
Yeah, I would say in terms of that, because I think when you look at it in the way that Goodwin mentioned it, I think he used the term 4 or 5. Was it quality or whatever term he used? Effectively, 4 or 5 out and out weekend starters. Yeah, that is what we need. Obviously, we need more signings than that because the depth in the squad's been so imbalanced this season. Where you're bringing in, where we had been bringing in experienced heads like McGhee and whatnot. You then also had the counterpoints where you had people like Milne. He was on the bench. Was it Mason Hancock on the bench? And Tom Ritchie on the bench. So there is definitely gaps where our depth could be a lot better, especially since, as you previously said, we're going to be playing group stages of the cup. I think having that ability to rotate the team where needed, with equally as good players is kind of essential. But I would say the 4 or 5 out and out starters would be a fair representation for the team.
Yeah, I think so, and it's certainly going to be something that we'll be keeping an eye on. Social media, journalists, leaks from Pittodrie, wherever we can get the information from over the coming weeks. But Philip,
Scott Burns.
Yeah, exactly. Philip, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on Red Tinted Glasses, making your debut, and maybe some stiff competition coming up for Calum when he comes back from his holiday in Budapest.
Oh no, it's like I say, this is the new great rivalry, me and Calum. I'm pretty sure he'll be messaging me at work when he's back on Skype. So
yeah,
I'll see what he has to say.
Yeah, but thanks very much for filling in at short notice, and this production will look as seamless as ever, despite the technical difficulties that me and you experienced during the recording.
Right. Thank you very much for having me on. It's been good fun. It's been good fun.
Yeah, it's been good to dissect the Dons and kind of look with a bit more positive outlook after that 3 points. So thank you very much. And joining me on the next segment of the show is returning guest Michael Monan as we look ahead to the weekend's trip to Hibernian. Well, Michael, by popular demand, you are returning to the podcast. Welcome back. How are you doing?
I'm all right. We've got a bit of a cold, but I'm absolutely fine apart from that. How are you?
Yeah, Good, thank you. Feels good that I've been able to speak about a win so far on this episode. A win that Hibs didn't get this season, but yeah, say by popular demand, you've been missing for a few shows. It's been that popular having you on in recent previews, but I guess it's been quite a shite season for both of us so far. Michael, how would you assess how your season's gone at Hibernian?
We have both been a disgrace. When you consider the resources that both clubs have, the fan base that both clubs have, the previous season finish from last season, to be where we are now is a disgrace. And when you consider the fact that Motherwell, Ross County, and two teams from the Championship last season are in the top six, it's disgraceful.
It's not been pretty, and Hibs, like ourselves, have gone through some managers this season as well. Obviously, most recently, Sean Maloney found himself collecting his P45 from Ron Gordon after just a short spell in charge of the club. Were you somewhat surprised to see Sean Maloney leave Hibs?
I wasn't. Like, it's a results business at the end of the day, and the results, well, they spoke for themselves. They weren't good enough. Losing twice in a week to Hearts, it's never good enough. And whilst I think that obviously we should have maybe given him the summer, I don't really know why we got rid of him now, considering like nothing's going to change between now and the summer. The only thing I can think of is they must have somebody else that they're thinking of bringing in, because we cannot have another couple of months and not knowing who's going to be manager and then bring somebody in to get rid of them in a couple of months again. So I don't know, and some of the signings, well, I mean, some of them just shouldn't be football players.
But there was, I'm not sure, you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, the guy, Sylvester Jasper, he looks a good player from what I've seen. And then, well, apart from maybe the cup game where he kind of lit up that Scottish Cup quarter final, Elias Melkerson has maybe just flattered to deceive. Is that harsh?
Well, I think with Melkerson, he was always going to be a long-term project. Like he's a young guy. He's not going to come in and do it straight away. But I think the reason why we had to bring him in so quickly is because obviously Nisbet got injured, and then when I've had him else, so he's kind of been parachuted into a role that he might not be ready for. Yeah.
And so I suppose on the management front, as you said, you're still searching for that new manager. David Gray's been taken temporary charge, won that first game in charge away to St Mirren, but then suffered defeat this weekend against Livingston. Who would you like to see realistically, as I've said to you before, because I know who you would want to see. It's who many Aberdeen fans wanted to see, is Bodo Glimt manager Kjell Knutsen.
Yeah.
But I think, let's be honest, that's very unrealistic for Hibs. Also been a lot of names throwing their names into the hat. We've seen Philip Koku, amongst others, putting themselves forward. Who would you like to see take over the reins at Hibernian?
I'd love to convince Neil Warnock to come out of retirement for one last hurrah. But you said realistic, so I don't know, to be honest. I think because the names that we're going with just now are just names that journalists come up with. That's what the betting on the markets are. It's just names that journalists have come up with. I think that because we've said David Gray will get to the end of the season, whilst I think we're looking, I don't think we're in a rush to get anyone. And it wouldn't surprise me if we got an absolute curveball that nobody was expecting.
I think, though, when you say about a curveball, I mean, I don't know about you and the rest of the Hibernian support, but certainly myself and a lot of maybe sensible-minded Aberdeen fans, I'll wait to see how that one goes down. When you look at this season with what was riding on it, look at Hearts, and you must really sting you as Hibs fans to see Hearts guaranteeing themselves in a £3 million group stages of European football up until Christmas. Is there a risk then with going for another inexperienced manager such as Sean Maloney? Obviously, Aberdeen did that risk with Stephen Glass and it backfired spectacularly. And we've paid the price this season by finishing in the bottom six. You guys have done similar, finished in bottom six, not got yourselves to a major final like we have, haven't done either. And next season, we're both
got to the cup final, Glen.
Oh, well, that's how much I'm paying attention to your season. But both of us now next season will be in the Premier Sports group stages. And yet we're missing out on the money spinning opportunities that Europe provides both of us.
Yeah, I think that we've both been ran absolutely diabolically. For the reasons that you've just said, the reasons that I mentioned at the beginning, it's not a good league. I mean, the fact that we even got to the last game before the split and we could both be still in the top six, I think shows how bad it is. With regards to them getting a European thing, I just hope for another COVID variant so they can't go. But in a football term, it's what can you? There's nothing really you can say apart from it's an opportunity missed by both of us.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose there's the kind of feeling in the Hibs support is that aimed at the board, similar like a lot of Aberdeen fans maybe hold it against Dave Cormack. Both clubs are now American owned. Given up what was at stake this season, it does feel like a missed opportunity. Is there that feeling over at Hibernian?
Well, whilst Aberdeen, from what I've seen on Twitter, etc., that their fans have sort of made their mind up about Dave Cormack. I think whatever camp you're in it, whatever side that may be. But with Ron Gordon, I think the jury's still out on him to an extent. I'm not a fan of the fact that his son is head of recruitment, considering the players that he's recruited. And I'm not, I don't know. I mean, I think it's very difficult for somebody to come in that's got absolutely zero connection to the club and to an extent even a connection to the sport to come in and understand exactly what the fans want. But whoever he appoints next manager is boom or bust for him. I think if he makes an arse it again, then there'll be pickets outside the stands asking why. So I think that's why he's taken so long to make a decision, and he's also coming back to Scotland this week. I think to do something with that, I'd hope.
Yeah, I'm sure maybe Dave might be on a flight over and they'll be having a wee chat about how to sell the two clubs over in America. Obviously, Aberdeen planning to have a mid-season friendly over in Atlanta, use that as a training camp when the World Cup comes about. I suppose we should talk about football, Michael, and not off the pitch matters. It's a trip to Easter Road for Aberdeen as we look to take on Hibernian. Both sides having won their respective home matches in this fixture. There's been 3 meetings between the sides, 2 wins for the Dons and 1 for Hibernian. However, Michael, 2022 has not been kind to both sides. Both sides just registering 2 wins apiece. It's not exactly a game that's going to be easy to market this weekend. What do you think we can expect?
I think if you're going, you're absolutely batshit mental. I think it'd be one of the. I just think it's going to be a glorified friendly, isn't it?
I suppose. I mean, mathematically, Aberdeen aren't safe, albeit 8 points clear of St Johnstone and 20 goals better off. You'd like to think. It's all but done, but I suppose mathematically Aberdeen do still need to go down to Easter Road and pick something up to all but seal our place in the Premiership next season.
Yeah, I mean, I think Aberdeen will be fine in terms of staying up. I I mean, it's an absolute disgrace that we're even having this conversation, to be honest. But that's where we are.
Yeah.
I just think it'll be much of a muchness game. I don't think.
And I suppose
definitely not worth £31.
No, I mean, the less said about the pricing of the game, the better. But, the term glorified friendly is probably what I would kind of lean towards as well. But if you look at the kind of the stats for both sides, both have really been kind of lackluster in front of goal in recent weeks. Hibs have only scored 3 in their last 5 at home. I think there's been a couple of 0-0 draws in there as well. We have scored 5 goals in our last 5 away games. However, we've not managed to keep a clean sheet. In fact, only keeping 1 away from home all season in the league. I just can't see where the entertainment is coming from in this game. Hibs probably looking to try players out to see who may or may not be here next season. And I suppose Jim Goodwin's kind of going to be doing the same. Yeah,
I mean, we had 18 shots on Saturday and not one of them was on target.
All about the data, though.
Yeah, I mean, that's for you to worry about. I'm not bothered about that. I cannot get enthused for this at all.
I suppose that's just kind of the story of being the bottom 6, because as I've got in the notes, it was apart from pride, I suppose, and potential of prize money depending on where the clubs finished, there's really not a lot of stake in this game.
Yeah, I mean, it's the players to the extent are all already on their holidays. Well, arguably you could say they've not reported for work all season, but it's just playing out time. It's playing out the fixtures. It's a complete waste of everyone's time. And if you're going to spend £31 going to that, I've got some magic beans I'd like to tell you.
But I suppose, do you think that pride will take over? Because for Hibs, it's an opportunity to once again, sadly, finish above us. That a win on Saturday would all but guarantee that, unless you somehow throw away 2 defeats in your last 2 fixtures. But then that also means we have to go and win away from home again. Do Hibs take confidence going into this game?
I think professional footballers have pride, or I like to think they do anyway. But I think we shouldn't mistake looking for pride and what you're actually capable of doing. I don't think we're very good. I think I said it. I don't know if I said it on this, but I've definitely said it many times that we're just not good at football, and we've relied on Martin Boyle far too much. And
both sides have kind of suffered from the January transfer window. Hibs showing how much reliance they had on Martin Boyle. Aberdeen, maybe not to the same extent, but we've certainly missed the creativity and directness that Ryan Hedges brought us. But I think also suffering from the lack of investment from the board in January, which has certainly saw us suffer at the top end of the pitch. And I think as a result, both sides have justifiably, and I don't know, I think you'll agree, judging by your tone so far, is deservedly ended up in the bottom 6 this season.
Well, the league doesn't lie, Glen. Yeah. And since the turn of the year, and this is why Maloney got binned essentially, but just isn't good enough. It's just not good enough. And whilst Jack Ross got sacked for a similar run of form, it shows that Ron Gordon isn't scared to sack managers that are underperforming. But coming to a time, it's like the players. It's the same players.
Yeah.
And it's like, they'd get anybody sacked then. Honestly, they're just absolute shite. Honestly, and it's a clear out is required.
And the thing is, I suppose it's respective of both clubs that clear outs are expected in the summer, and it'll be an interesting case to see who performs that clear out and rebuild, I suppose, better. One player that Hibs have got back in recent weeks is Harry Clark, the defender who joined from, I suppose from Arsenal, but played the beginning of the season at Ross County. I noticed in the last few games he's been playing more of a wing back, when I think at Ross County he performed more in that centre back role. How good has he been for Hibs since returning to full fitness?
He's been one of our best players.
I think it says a lot about your defender.
I also don't think he's played in the same position in 2 different games. I think every game I've seen him, he's been in a different position. But he's solid. He's one of the few I'd keep, to be honest. Yeah. I don't know how you feel, but I just, as a general team, I just think they're completely unlikable.
Who?
Our team.
Oh, I mean, I've
got a question for you.
Okay, go on then.
Who's your favourite player for Aberdeen? Don't have one, do you?
Ross McCrory.
Right, I mean, I suppose you have to say that if you're giving him an award and that, but
yeah.
You have to think. It's not easy.
No, it's not.
It's a shambles.
I think that's actually an interesting point, because I can't remember if it was in our group chat or if it was something I was discussing with folk, that there's nobody now in that Aberdeen squad that you stand out and says, that's who I like. Or, maybe when you were kids playing in the playground or in the park after school, kids would automatically identify with a player that they want to be from that Aberdeen squad.
Come on.
Yeah.
There's no one there.
Yeah. And it's going to be an interesting season off-season for both clubs and how we rebuild. Again, looking towards the weekend from a Hibernian perspective, Michael, Sylvester Jasper, I mentioned him earlier in the episode, he's found himself on the bench. Elias Merkelson, he's not exactly covered himself in glory. He's not found the back of the net after all that hype from the Motherwell Cup game. James Scott has found himself back in the starting 11. Do you think David Gray will look to make changes for this game? Will we maybe see some Hibs youngsters finding their way into the match day squad this weekend?
Hope so. Why not? Can't be any worse than what we have.
But I suppose when safety is secured and you can only finish as high as 7th, there's nothing to lose, is there?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know the prize money breakdown. I don't know the difference between whatever position you finish in, but I'm not bothered about it, to be honest. I think if you're bottom 6, it's a failure anyway.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to see youngsters playing. As I said, they can't be any worse than who would be playing anyway. Might actually give the other ones a kick up the arse that they need.
Mm-hmm.
I'd play them. Why not?
Yeah. And around James Scott, how have you found him in terms of causing opposition defences problems? When you look at Aberdeen, a team that have only kept, as I said, 1 away clean sheet in the league all season, do you think this is a perfect opportunity to give James Scott some confidence?
I mean, he shouldn't be. He should not be at Hibs next season. He's not a football player. He played up front against Hearts in the semi-final, and to give him his due, he did put himself about. But my God, that is the bare minimum. That is the absolute least you'd expect.
And I suppose
that's a point of getting lauded nowadays. He's not a footballer.
And in terms of you've got an American signing, our American number 9. There's a lot of doubt on his future. Chris Mueller, he's found himself more as an impact signing. Do you expect that impact substitution, not signing? Sorry. Do you expect that trend to continue this weekend, or do you think there's a chance for him to find himself back in the starting 11?
Well, I'll go back to what I was saying earlier with Chris Mueller, because he was signed on a pre-contract.
Mm-hmm.
So we knew, we were getting him in January, but we knew for a couple of months that he was coming, right? That was Ben Gordon. That was his marquee signing. That's Ron Gordon's son, head of recruitment. That's a marquee signing. That's the benchmark of his professional ability as a recruiter. Chris Miller is absolutely diabolical. He's absolutely diabolical. He arrived unfit. He had 3 months to get fit. Came overweight. Now they're talking about, he needs to get up to speed. But in May, well, April, but like May.
Yeah.
It's, if you cannot get fit in 4 months, then what are you doing?
I think it kind of just sums up the state of your season when you've got comments like that. Again, you look back to, I suppose even you can draw similarities then with Hibs recruitment and Aberdeen's recruitment. The fact that we didn't even get our head of recruitment in until after the summer transfer window had already closed. And Stephen Glass was left to rule the roost over that. And you just need to look at how many of those summer signings are no longer with the club. J. Emmanuel Thomas has been playing football on the beach in Dubai with Anthony Joshua this weekend. You've got Scott Brown, who's no longer here. Recruitment has been shambolic. Football has been shambolic. Thank God there's only 3 games left this season, eh?
I know. I mean, it's the worst part is that I'm total resignation now.
Yeah,
I'm past the point of, I wouldn't say I don't care, but it's like
I think the word me and Calum used last week was apathy had kind of set in for the remainder of the season. I think it's almost at the point that whoever wins this weekend, if there is a positive outcome for Hibs or Aberdeen, we probably wouldn't even care if the other was winding each other up.
I don't even think it's worth mentioning. I think it's like, let the game play out and then just like we'll talk about something else.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter.
We'll look ahead to next season instead. In terms of Aberdeen, Ross McCrory will be back available after serving his 1-match suspension at the weekend over Dundee. It'll be interesting to see if he returns to the starting lineup in place of Christian Ramirez, who took his place in the starting 11 in that win over the Dens Park outfit. Would you, as a Hibs fan, be happy to see Ramirez drop to the bench and Aberdeen just go with that one striker?
Well, that depends if Christian Ramirez has got Aberdeen fans to be arguing with on Twitter or not.
Or if he's got to grass up Ryan Porteous and try and get him sent off again.
Well, Ryan Porteous is back from his suspension, so if you have paid £31, you might get a little bit of value from that. But I mean, Glen, I'm going to be honest. I don't care. I don't care. I think
I think for Aberdeen, we've not really seen the best of Marley Watkins since he's returned from his injury. We're really struggling for 4 goals. It's been 3 games since we've actually scored a goal from open play, which I think kind of sums up again where Aberdeen have been this season. My main concern really is defensively. Bates and Gallagher haven't exactly covered themselves in glory in recent weeks. Joe Lewis dug us out of a few problems that we self-inflicted against Dundee, and I think if Hibs can kind of imply that directness that we saw from them at the start of the season, but again probably more led through Martin Boyle, there might be some success. I just get the sense in this game though, Michael, looking at Hibs' recent form, that it's going to almost be a case of first goal wins this game.
Well, I think it'll be 3-1 Hibs, based on absolutely nothing other than the fact that the first 2 games, both sides won 1-0 at home. And then the last game, when I was surplus to requirements for the podcast, Aberdeen won 3-1.
Absolutely. Patchy 3-1, probably our best performance of the year.
And then so this is going to have to be 3-1 to Hibs. It's the way it works, I'm afraid.
Well, I mean, the only encouragement I take from that game is probably one of Vicente Bazouin's best games. Obviously winning goal of the season award from that, although I do still feel that Jet was robbed of that because the club made sure that only current employees could win awards. So I think there was a wee bending of the rules in making sure that that prize didn't go to the former striker who's enjoying the high life in Dubai just now. Marley Watkins pretty much bullied Lewis Stevenson when he did come on, so expect more of the same from the Welshman this weekend. Dylan McGhee as well, an interesting one. Certainly enjoyed himself Sunday evening in May Day in Aberdeen. A player who seems to always have a point to prove against his former employees. It'll be interesting to see if there's any game time as his Aberdeen career looks set to wind down come the end of the season. Looking forward to seeing what sort of impact, if called upon, he has. I suppose in terms of Aberdeen's own defence, as I said, in terms of our centre-back pairings, I don't really think there's much we can do in terms of changing up. We've just got to put up with it until the end of the season. Jack Mckenzie's impressed in that win against Dundee and also put in a solid shift against Livingston despite us succumbing to defeat in that game. Calvin Ramsey as well returned to the starting 11 in that game against Dundee. Bright young player who looks set to leave the club in the summer for pastures down south. Whether or not we will see him loaned back to the club for a spell at Pittodrie next season remains to be seen. But again, a player with a point to prove and a player with a bright future, it would be good to see him get as many minutes as possible before his Aberdeen career comes to an end and just show what he can do against Hibs. You know, it would be good for us to go down and register another away win this season. They've been few and far between. I think the supporters bus we've got is just about full this weekend. So, you know, those that are paying their hard-earned cash to travel down to Edinburgh hopefully are rewarded with a solid performance and also 3 points to take back up north. I'm sure you also disagree on everything that's just been said.
I say it, don't you?
Yeah. Well, we've got to look at both sides. You've obviously provided the Aberdeen input. Calum's enjoying himself in Budapest, so there's no one to back me up from the Aberdeen perspective. But glorified friendly or not, you know, as I said, Aberdeen aren't mathematically safe from relegation unless St Johnstone somehow score a shitload of goals between now and the end of the season. I'd like to think that we are okay, but I think it's not 3 points would absolutely guarantee our safety going into next season. So, and I would just like to see us kind of assert a bit of domination on a game, actually, you know, look like we can cause teams problem, not just needing penalties to do so. I think, Michael, I don't know how you feel about this Hibs team. Do you feel that it's a team low on confidence or just kind of looking towards the end of the season already?
Both. I also think there's a lack of quality.
I think you could say the same about Aberdeen. I think there's a lack of fight in the team, and
I think we've got far too many players that have outstayed their welcome. I think that in order to rebuild, how can you keep players that have survived so many rebuilds when you're trying to rebuild?
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens come the summer for both teams. It'll be interesting also to see what happens this weekend as Aberdeen look to go down and claim that 3 points that would also lift us above Hibs as we come towards the end of the season. Michael, it's been great getting you back on the podcast after your sabbatical. That's what I'm going to call it. You've said 3-1. I'll say 1-1, which will do nobody any favours in terms of bragging rights. But I look forward to catching the game and hopefully catching up with you next week to discuss the events of the game as well. Thanks very much for joining me on Red Tinted Glasses today.
Cheers. Thank you.
My thanks again goes to Michael Monan and Philip Mair for joining me on this episode of Red Tinted Glasses as we looked back on the Dons 1-0 win over Dundee and looked ahead as Aberdeen head to the capital this weekend to take on Hibernian in, as Michael called it, a glorified friendly. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Calum will be returning to co-host next week. It looks like we'll probably do a live episode on Monday Monday evening, I think we'll set that one up for, given that we travel to St Johnstone midweek, normally when our next episode is out. So we'll try and do something ahead of that fixture. If you have enjoyed this episode, remember to hit the follow button wherever you're listening to this episode. Hit that subscribe and like button over on the YouTube channel as we close in on 800 subscribers. Over there, we really do appreciate your support through this season. It's not been great on the pitch, but we've enjoyed making this content off the pitch, and we're so glad that so many of you have also enjoyed it. So thank you again for listening, watching, and we'll catch you next week.